annual Startup Boston Week. I'm Harish, and I will continue to be your host today. Huge thanks once again to Suffolk University, Sawyer Business School, for hosting us for the second consecutive year. Suffolk University is the prime downtown location to explore Boston's innovation ecosystem and learn from industry leaders. The goal behind Startup Boston Week is to connect the entire Greater Boston and New England startup community across all departments, all industries, and across all funding stages for 5 days of learning and connecting with one another. The team that creates Startup Boston Week is primarily volunteer, and all the folks running the conference today are volunteering their time as well. So thank you for attending this today. It is a labor of love, and we appreciate all your roles appreciate all of you playing a role in shaping our startup community. And a special thanks to MPHR for sponsoring this session. Startup Boston Week could not happen without awesome partners like them. So thank you so much once again for making it today, and I'll pass it to the speakers.
All right, can people hear me? I don't know if this thing is on. My name is Joe Aquillo. I'll be the moderator. We have a couple of changes to this panel. Courtney is actually unable to attend, so we've kind of shifted now towards more of a engaging discussion. Throughout this conversation, we will be providing kind of different viewpoints in terms of like the way of working today. To my left, we have Barbara, who'll be speaking more on the hybrid side, and to my right, we have Paul, who's speaking more on the on-site side. Ironically, like I'm remote working, so it works perfectly as well. But one thing that we want to focus on is keeping this engaging. So any questions that you have throughout this panel, please raise it. We're not going to wait till the very end. We want to keep it top of mind and keep this an ongoing conversation. So kind of like some key points that we're going to focus on throughout this, I would say, is one, like understanding the like landscape. We've all seen now that that shift towards like hybrid, remote, on-site, and what does that look like, and how do we balance that with productivity and flexibility within the workplace? Understanding diversity. How does diversity play a role in terms of the modern working environments? Kind of thinking about strategic development. So how do we combine the strengths of like on-site working and the strengths of remote working and hybrid into our normal working environments? And lastly, adaptability and collaboration. Like how do we identify certain ways that we can improve adaptability and foster collaboration across all these different workspaces? So to begin, we'd love just to understand from everybody who, and I will define it as on-site would be 4+ days, hybrid 1 to 3 days, and remote has the flexibility to work wherever. How many people work remotely? Okay. Hybrid? And an on-site. All right. So I say it's a combination more so for the hybrid and remote, but we do have a couple of on-site people as well. I'm excited to kick this off, and I will let Barbara introduce herself, followed by Paul.
Hi, I'm Barbara Donnelly. I have over 30 years of experience in multiple industries, 8 specifically in HR and 5 at my current organization. Our workplace transitioned from fully remote to hybrid 3 years ago. So we were the only ones in our building besides the Boston Globe and some lawyers who were coming to work. So we definitely made friends with security. So we felt like we were at the forefront because we had no other model to follow or anybody else's footsteps. Some fun facts about me. I always like to make it a little bit more personal. I read over 60 books this year. I'm an avid knitter, and I'm the girl with the narwhal tattoo.
Nice.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Paul Corellis. I lead the HR services team at MPHR. We work with businesses of all shapes, sizes, and industries. From a HR consulting standpoint, we also offer payroll, HCM type services. So MP is celebrating 20 years in business. I've been there for 10 of those. And in terms of our makeup, I'll disclose this, even though I'm talking about on-site work, I do work a hybrid model, usually in the office on Mondays and either at home or on the road the rest of the week. And MP has had somewhat of a hybrid model for some time, dating back to before the pandemic, but in terms of our service work with clients, we were largely on-site visiting with clients for the HR consulting. So meeting with a client at their place of work for meetings and trainings and consultations and HR assessments and all of that. And obviously, COVID necessitated a shift where, to be completely honest, I thought it was going to be temporary. Hey, clients definitely need HR advice right now in the height of the pandemic. we'll do the things virtually while we have to, and then we'll resume the on-site. But what we found, and credit to our team there, is that we can really show tremendous value consulting and working with clients in a virtual environment. So I'd say the majority of our HR work that we do with businesses is now virtual, but we do go on site when we can and when it makes sense. So it's been interesting both from an internal as a company at MP, but also in our interactions with our clients.
And I'll give my fun fact as well. Even though I've been in Boston for, I'd say, probably the past like 10, 11-ish years, I recently moved out, now live in Cleveland, Ohio, so because I have the flexibility of working remote. So I am here, but I also have been present for hybrid, on-site, as well as remote working. I'll kick it off with you, though, thinking about like just generally productivity and performance. What would you say are some key components that you have maintained at your workforce in terms of like making sure that you can balance it in terms of just the design of it? So thinking about policy, technology infrastructure, thinking about autonomy when designing it. How did you go about it in terms of being successful, and how are you measuring that success?
So many great questions. So firstly, how did we go about it? By the seat of our pants. When you're in a startup, you sometimes have to pivot and work with what you have. So we didn't necessarily have full policies, but we did have like different parameters of like, hey, make sure that you're getting outside and not sitting at your desk all day. And when we transitioned back to in-person, how do you balance the need, like how you were working remotely versus now you're back in the office? And it's definitely around a lot of flexibility, definitely conversations that you have with folks, as well as I said, some pivoting. Different technology. We really didn't change much of the technology that we were using. We just definitely leaned more heavily on it. I think one of the challenges was specifically around like collaboration. We are definitely a whiteboarding kind of organization. There's whiteboards rolling around the office in every single room. So when you are remote, either when we were fully remote or when we transitioned into the office and being remote some days, how do you balance that like need for like pointing at a board and writing when the technology wasn't really there then, and you just kind of work through it. And then I think when transitioning to being in the office, we tried to focus those on-site days to be more of those collaborative days to try to bridge that gap with the Wednesdays and Fridays, which are our remote optional days, having those days be more dedicated to heads down work and projects.
How have people or your employees responded, and like what challenges have you dealt with, and are there any current challenges that you're willing to share?
So I can address some challenges. So definitely the main challenge is people not wanting to come back into the office. I think one of the ways that we addressed that is we gave as much notice as possible. We didn't make it a mandate to be like, okay, June 1st is when this is happening. It's like, all right, June 1st is when the office is going to be back open. You have until the end of the summer to come back into the office. And if you need accommodations or if that's not going to work with you, please have a conversation with your manager and work with people ops in which to address any individual specifically needs. Based on my relationships with the folks and conversations we had, I expected to lose like at least 3 people because of the mandate that we had. I only lost 1, and it ended up being like a year later and not initially like I thought it was going to be within 3 months. So I think we, as an organization, but also employees, adapted to the needs and the requests of the organization. Do we still continue to have issues? In every survey, remote work is one of the top things that is brought up. But the ask in that request has changed over time. So initially in surveys, it would be like, we want more options for working remotely, and we'd said, no, this is what we're offering. It would still continue to come up, and then there was questions of fairness. So like some people were able to transition to being fully remote because they need different needs, and some people were not. So then there was feelings of unfairness. What they don't know is that we had a policy in place, it just wasn't published. And so then we published that policy, and that really addressed some of those issues. So some people are like, I don't like that we now have a policy because I don't have as much flexibility. I don't feel like I have as much flexibility before. And then other people are like, I really like that we have a policy. And that's what happens when you send any survey. You're going to get one person who says the office is too hot and somebody who says the office is too cold. And somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Can you remind everyone what your company does?
Oh, so we are a data analytics organization in the clean energy space. We utilize a lot of different tools and meteorology experts to assist clean energy buyers and sellers.
Yeah, so I think to piggyback off of that, transparency is huge. If you're wanting or feel that your best foot forward is having people back in person, transparency and explaining the why goes a long way rather than just saying, hey, as of June 1st, we're going to all be in the office because we think it's best. The more you can do to explain what you're hoping to achieve from that and what you feel the benefits are going to be, go a long way. And then the other part is just listening. If you're getting the resistance, ask them why. What is their desire to be remote? What can we do to make it more amicable for you? What can we do to make it a more ideal workplace for you in the event that we are going to look for people to be physically present more often? And I think in terms of productivity specifically, it's really important for leaders to not just punt on that and assume that once people are there in the flesh that they're going to be productive and they're going to be working hard and really be present in a work standpoint as well. So just because you have people in the office now doesn't mean you can take your eye off the ball in terms of productivity. It doesn't eliminate distractions, it just creates different ones. They are in front of you, you can address them more easily, but you still do have to keep an eye on productivity even if you do get people within your four walls.
So I think, oh, go.
I just want to piggyback off that a little bit. I think the thing that what you just said, like being able to like see people, when we were fully remote, there was very much a feeling of disconnect between, from a people perspective, but also from a manager perspective of like, not that I don't know what people are working on. People were definitely working, but more along the lines of like what struggles they were having. People were not always bringing up the things that they were having trouble with, maybe because there were cameras. I don't know why. I don't know why people don't talk about the problems that they have. I can't fix a catchphrase at my office is I can't fix the things I don't know about. And if I find out about something like you're leaving because of this a particular reason and you didn't bring it up with your manager, you didn't bring it up with me, and it was something we could have addressed, I'm like, oh man, I get sad. And so it's in fostering that environment in which people feel like they can have these open and honest conversations and and the transparency that you speak about. But when I am in the office, I notice things about people. I notice if somebody is like disconnected from a meeting. I notice that the person who is always asked questions is stopped asking questions, which when we were remote I did not feel like I had as much of a handle on it. Does that mean that other organizations are doing it so much better and they've solved that problem? Yes. The method that we're using doesn't necessarily have to be the method that any other organization is using. It's just the one that's working for us.
Yeah, a big learning lesson for us was really to speak to that point in the training and the onboarding. So definitely made some stumbles when we made our first remote hires of HR partners and HR consultants. I really failed to realize how much organic learning happens when we're around each other and someone listens in on a phone call with a client or just a conversation. And we just learned we have to be much, much more intentional with our training and our shadowing and really folding somebody into seeing the behind the scenes stuff when we're doing our training and our onboarding, because a lot can be missed in the virtual environment from that sense.
And I think that's a great segue to find that like balanced viewpoint where I think that productivity is kind of highly individualized and it is based upon the company culture, it's based upon personal preference and also job roles. Do I want my doctor to be working remote 100% of the time? No, like I do need to see them in person. But for me, for example, I get to work remote. So I have that balance of how do you be intentional in terms of onboarding? How do you provide those necessary resources from day one and really like dig into making sure that they are provided? But the same token, like there is parts of it that I do miss a little bit, like being able to swivel around and be like, oh, hey, Susie, like what about X, Y, and Z? But I think you have to then be intentional around how do you spend your day? How do you interact with people? I think we're all tired of the happy hours or the multiple like end of day happy hours. I think those have kind of like faded away. So what are other ways that we can engage the employees? Or, virtual happy hours.
Right.
And
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say now, like, this is a good segue into, like, I would say the flexibility and, like, work-life balance. And I think that really, we've seen that over COVID, that we've seen that shift and flexibility of remote working can contribute to a better work-life balance. how has your office adapted to that for the similar benefits? So thinking about it for maybe a mother who has childcare, thinking about it from a commuting standpoint, like how have you managed like whether it's flexible working hours, thinking about personalized working environments at home, like what have you guys done to be creative in that standpoint?
Treat people like people.
Do you want to repeat that?
Treat people like people, and understand that everybody's coming to you with their own stuff. One thing that we do is like, yeah, we have that remote work policy. We call it the work location policy, and it talks about when you're working not in the office. And so like, yeah, if you have somebody coming to your house to install a boiler, don't come to work that day. Take care of that. If you have a doctor's appointment, take care of that. Meet people where they are, and have resources available for them so that they know that they can do that. We also don't have like set hours as an organization, except for one day a week where we really ask you to come in at 9:15 for our stand-up, because that's like when we all get together. It's the only day of the week where I'm like, please come in by a certain time. But like, I'm like, if you're getting your job done, I don't care, and your manager doesn't care, unless there's business needs. Like I think the sales team I think their manager has like set hours for them. But I think it's team by team dependent, but also like meet people where they are. Like.
Yeah, and I think some of it, as silly as it sounds, comes down to the construction of your office or your workspace. I think we all really harped on, we want people on site because of the collaboration. So we're going to have a office like this where there are no walls and no assigned seats and things like that. And there are great uses for that, but as they've started to do studies and surveys of these employees that are coming into work, what are they looking for in their workspace if they're going to have to come on site? They want focus areas. They want to be able to have an office they can use, or a cubicle or a desk where they're able to focus and do their work. And sure, they want the ability and the space to be able to have meetings and have collaboration, but you need to factor in some of that individual focus time as well. I think that's really important. Also, in terms of accommodating, I think a greatly underused or unknown benefit are Section 132 plans. So those are sometimes called like transit FSAs or commuter check, things like that, where if you can subsidize it as a business, that's great. Definitely provide some incentive to give people some money towards parking, transit passes. It's all pre-tax. Short of that, I know there's a lot of startups here that might not have the budget to subsidize that for the employees, but even offering it and allow the employees to get those expenses on a pre-tax basis can be really huge and be a difference maker to help incentivize them and make it less of an issue for them coming into your office.
So for the audience, what questions, if you have any questions, do you have, but also what challenges have you faced while going across, whether it's remote, in-person, hybrid? Just want to hear from the audience. And introduce your name and just where you work so people can get understanding.
Yeah, my name is Kevin. I'm a marketing and talent branding person at a startup called Komodo Technologies. My previous job was at a very old company that was always fully on site and then went totally remote during the pandemic, but didn't really update like their policies or their communication expectations, and I came into a very like dysfunctional organization. So I guess my question is like, how have you like navigated like changing cultural expectations, changing communication availability expectations? Like, what does that look like as you've navigated like remote versus in person and all that?
Yeah, definitely working with businesses in that sense. A lot of it has to do with being very transparent and really publishing what those policies and expectations are. When you're expected to be present, what your availability is supposed to be like, what are your SLAs in terms of getting back to internal partners, external partners, and clients? How long do you have to respond to an email? Distractions too. What are you acceptance of? Are you okay with folks having children there, or do you need them to have a office and workspace that's free of distractions, things like that? And a lot of us assume that people are going to have common sense there, but when it comes to HR and policy and labor law, what have you, there isn't much room for assumptions. You really have to put it out there what your expectations are and make them as clear as possible.
Exactly what he said. We have a communication at maturity document on our wiki that clearly defines what each method, what each communication method is for, and the SLAs associated with it. And I think one of the highlights is, if you get a message, just acknowledge it. If you can't answer it right then, be like, noted, get back to you by X per period, moment of time.
And sometimes it can even be things as little as expectations for Zoom calls and things like that. Do you expect camera on, or are you okay with camera off, or follow the client's lead, whatever it may be? Those are kind of things you really want to address to avoid uncomfortable conversations at the very least.
And then from a remote standpoint, I think you both have said transparency is key. Making sure that you're listening to your audience and everyone within your working environment to understand what are the challenges that they are facing. So it's not just coming from top down, it's bottom up as well, and really adapting. I think sometimes we get stuck in a way that this is the one way it needs to go, but adaptability is really key because we've seen that the way of working has changed from just COVID shifted away. And how do you find that balance between what the business need is, recognizing that we might be cameras on and why we do that and we're intentional around that, but also like, okay, if your camera's off, like, okay, you had your kid running in the background, so understanding that as well.
Definitely to the transparency piece, but also, God, I lost my thought. No, it's gonna be there. It's totally there. No, it's not. I lost it. It was so brilliant though. Like all the best thoughts you have in the shower when you can't write them down.
Yeah. I'll let you go ahead.
Awesome. My name is Mike Federa. I run a startup called Trova, think Bumble for friends for work. Our goal is to increase collaboration and mentorship in the workforce. I think a question for each of you, would just love to hear, what are the primary KPIs that you're tracking for whatever work style that you have, in-person, hybrid, or remote? Like training, performance, culture, and then who in your workforce is measuring them and how are they measuring it? Is it the CEO for culture? Is it, the finance department? Like who cares and how are you measuring success?
It's a great question. I don't think we're not currently measuring it to that specificity. And then I did remember my brilliant thought, by the way. And it was basically like we have a part of our core values is like feedback and transparency. And so taking that, like we don't just take feedback and put it in a drawer. We take the feedback and we try to make changes. Hence why the comments we get about remote work has evolved over time because we've addressed or answered the questions that people have brought up. So to the communication piece that we were just talking about is like looking at, is this method still working for us? Is there anything that we should change? Is there anything we should try? And like throwing spaghetti at the wall and be like, oh, that's sticking a little bit better than the way we were doing it before. It's like you never have to stick with the status quo. Back to your question. So we don't necessarily have specific metrics around what you're talking about. We have a pulse survey that we send out that asks specific questions that we've been tracking over many, many years. And so like we try to head off things that way, as well as our anonymous ENPS survey that we utilize. We are looking into different tools, so I would love to talk with anybody if they're utilizing a tool so that I can start tracking some better metrics in 2025.
One thing that we really got better about measuring is time spent with our clients and like what types of activities we're doing with our clients. Because again, we were going on site. It was much easier for us to measure. We didn't have to be intentional about it. We knew if they were going there and meeting with a client, they're having a quality interaction. So it was really deciding what are the quality interactions in a virtual environment. Just sending a compliance update email or something like that is sure showing some value, but it's not the same as having a in-depth meeting with them, going over strategic HR items, helping them put together a survey, doing a handbook, whatever it might be, doing a training with their management team. So really measuring, A, how much time are we spending with each client, and B, what are we determining our quality interactions and how many of those are happening with each specific client.
And from the remote standpoint, we have a global workforce, and we moved away from the ENPS and moved towards more like drivers, like what is key in your role? Like, do you have the psychological safety? Do you feel that you have the career development? And those gaps then drove like kind of the key things that we think about. So like development, how do we develop our managers? How do we make sure that they're working off the same playbook? Connectivity. So like when we do come together for offsites, what does that model look like? Is it twice per year, 3 times per year? Is it collaboration? So it's more the holistic approach around like what are you getting out of this, and how do we make sure that you are engaged within your normal day-to-day?
How do you counter the perception that some workers returning to the office, the perception that, management needs to see people, otherwise they don't trust them? How do you counter that?
For me, I think it's just like setting up a workplace and setting up activities and letting the results speak for themselves. So We have an event actually coming up next week. We do it once a year where we bring in all our remote folks and bring them on site and do activities. And just the amount of energy and momentum and just good stuff that happens, and we feed off and ride off that for several months. Getting people in person, I think there's a lot of kind of head trash there with people just assuming like they're going to be in the office and going through the motions. But if you set up opportunities for collaboration and make that on-site time meaningful, people will quickly realize that there's some real value to that.
I got lost in his brilliant answer.
And I would say, like, I love this question. I say, like, if you see, like, what people did during COVID, like, a lot of businesses were working remotely, and they were successful doing it. And that doesn't go away overnight. Like, we've seen the success of doing it. Businesses are still successful. They're raising revenue. They're still growing. Like, they've been able to do that remotely. I think, though, it's like, how do you build in and integrate that connectivity in terms of, like, so like what we do is we have 4 different offsites. So we have one where it's all team. We have one where you come to, we technically have a New York City office, but I'm like, no one's ever there. Then we have your team specific one, and we have a collaboration one where you're working with another team. So we were really intentional around how do you kind of like integrate and also then communicate with other people and build those bonds that when you go back to working remotely, you feel connected with that individual. And we do find the balance between not only like working, but also free time and also alone time during those events, so you can actually feel that you're making the most out of it.
I think it's perception versus reality. So there's a perception like, oh, you're not in the office, so therefore you're not working. But if you're a team and you are hitting your goals, so that's obviously not true. So that's how we address that. But I can say our CEO came into the office one day and there was 2 people in a section where there's normally like 45 people. And so he had a conversation with some heads of the team to be like, hey, why were none of your people in? And so then that team subsequently had a meeting to be like, this is how do I answer our CEO when he asks me why nobody was in the office on this Monday?
And
At 10 a.m., at like a normal time.
And I'll give a more holistic or like a more meta level too. Like globally, like we are very different in the United States. We are really work focused. When we message some of our international people like off hours, they do not respond in any way, shape, or form. That is their time. They are more of like what?
It's illegal in some countries.
Yeah, it's like illegal. It's like 9 to 5. And I think it's shifting the mindset that not everything needs to be work. My favorite line that people say is, if I had more time in the day, I would get more. No, you wouldn't. You just add on another day of doing more work. How do you find that time to work your deep focus time, like you said, in the morning? Or your meeting times, whether it's thinking about working hours, but also how do you dedicate that time for your work-life balance? I have a dog who has a lot of issues, so we have to go to the vet every so often. Or like I'm going on a walking meeting. Like I want to go for a run at 4:30, but then I might need to hop online at 7. So it's like finding that flexibility. And we've shown we've been able to do it. It's how do you then make it work for your individual office and thinking about things like your company culture, thinking about personal preferences, your job type.
I have a question regarding, because you said you have a global team. How do you create the fairness across the global teams, especially global pays and different working cultures, different holidays and everything? Like if you're having, because we are starting a global HR business, it's like we have to build the team global in every single continent from the day on. But it's just really hard for us to manage like how to create different holidays off in different continents because they have really good different policies.
There is no one size fits all. I've done it like 3 different ways, and it really depends upon the company. For example, holidays. I believe we have like 50 people across 21 countries, so it's a legit nightmare to say the least. But I believe we offer like 12 or 13 like holidays. And if a country has more than that, we reflect that. But then also we provide. We looked at the max, so I think one has like 16. So we then provide 4 floating holidays for everyone else within that country or within that country to take because we wanted it to be equitable. Pay is a little bit more tricky, and I think it depends upon your company philosophy, whether you're going to do like regional country, whether like there are different ways to think about pay. So I think that's really dependent upon your total rewards philosophy. I don't know if you guys have a global.
No, I don't. So
We
I'll give that to you.
did But both of those individuals have since left the organization. And we had somebody in Canada and we had somebody in London, and we didn't hire them there. They both worked in the United States. One needed to move to London for visa issues, and the other one moved because their partner. But we tried to respect the prevailing wage within their country, which ended up being aligned with what ours was. And we utilized our HRIS Rippling, which was able to tell us what those mandatory holidays were and all of those things, as well as handling all of the different laws in those particular countries as it relates to HR policies. So we just listened to what our software told us.
After you, want to get to you, because I know you've had your hand up, so like you can go though.
I'll bring the mic to you next. My question's similar to the gentleman in the front, but during the pandemic when knowledge workers went remote, there was a tremendous amount of data that suggested that remote work is working.
Yeah.
What's the data that you're paying attention to now that says that in the office work is better or important?
I think there's a data point for everything. That's the sad point. Like, if you look at a McKinsey study, it talks around this. If you look at a Mercer study, it says this. So I have seen people pull different viewpoints from it where they pick like one line of it. And I think I look at it more so as like, what is the intentionality behind it? What are they saying? And they're saying that the most successful workforces are the ones that build a model that's reflective of their organization. And some might need more of that in office, so then you can support it with it. I think that flexibility is the biggest thing that we've seen across, I would say, some of the recent studies. Like PwC said, I think it was like 2 or 3 days a week is like the new model. So I think that it's just the flexibility to meet your employees where they are at is the way of going versus coming down and saying like, this is what we need to do because we think it's this way. I would love to know what you guys both think.
I think one concern that we're seeing pop up quite a bit with a fully virtual or remote environment is just the risk of overemployment. So folks that are taking on 2, 3, 4 jobs because they can do them all remotely and obviously aren't giving their everything to any one of those. So not to say that's eliminated from a hybrid or an on-site work model, but it is one of the risk factors when you're fully remote that you may have people working for multiple organizations at once.
I don't have specific data, I just have anecdotes, which is what I have to base things off of. The workforce has been happier since we moved to the hybrid model, and I think it's because coming into the office helps work-life balance in that it allows you to separate this is where I work and this is where I live. I know that I had trouble, and a lot of people in our organization had trouble turning off, and because I would sit on my couch for 14 hours and be like, the sun came up and the sun went down, and I'm still working because like you said, if you give me more hours, I'm just gonna keep working because that's my to-do list. And so I have noticed that people are taking more vacations because they're coming into the office. We had to force a vacation in 2020. So it's anecdotal. But I know that as the years go on, there's going to be more studies, and there's going to, like you said, there's going to be data and numbers that support everything.
And I will say the one thing that complements flexibility is intentionality. What we're seeing is a move from just companies saying, come in the office 3 days a week to being more structured. Like your team's coming in on Tuesday, your team's coming in on Thursday. Because if everyone comes in on different days, then what's the point of people coming in? You're gonna have attendance being lower versus okay, the whole company comes on Monday, your team comes on Tuesday, and then you get to pick Thursday or Friday. So you have a greater attendance and intentionality behind why you're meeting in the office.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Mike Lemire. I run an executive coaching firm, and one of the things after I've led people teams for 15 years, one of the things I notice that comes up quite a bit now is how to work with direct reports in a hybrid model where you have some direct reports who are local to you who you maybe get to see 2-3 days a week, and some direct reports who are hired in another city altogether. I'm curious about some of the tactics you've seen to be successful when you're working with those frontline managers or even executives who have sort of a dispersed team across the country.
I can't answer that. I would say we only have 3 people who are remote, and they don't like. And I've had conversations with their managers and with them as individual contributors, and their communications have been really. They're all praising their relationships that they have. So like we haven't had that issue.
I think it's just some more time, having some more intention time with those folks that are remote, whether it's you've already got your one-on-ones, but maybe every other week or once a month, you also have some development time too. Again, depending on what the role is and what the industry is, it may be appropriate where for your on-site reports, you get to kind of see them in action or hear them on a call or see them do a training. Maybe it's, inviting yourself to a meeting or a training that they're doing for the virtual employee, just to be able to see them more in their natural habitat and not just on those predetermined times where you're set to meet. So setting up some time where it's a little unconventional, but you're finding ways to get in and see them outside of that standard meeting that they've kind of grown accustomed to and might become stale.
Yeah, I always recommend that like not every single one-on-one should be inside a room with a computer. We have one room in our office that is lo-fi. It has no whiteboard, no TV, no phone. And I love having one-on-ones in that room because it allows, like that particular meeting is gonna be more like face-to-face and eyeballs. I know something that like I've done with my manager is like, we have like a one-on-one, but now we also have like a strategic meeting, which we have later today, where we're gonna talk about like our visa policy. And we're just gonna heads down only talk about that topic. And so have it be more targeted. But something else that we have our managers do is in those one-on-ones is always, I hope they always do this, but they should be asking, what do you need help with? Or how can I help you? So a lot of the times allowing those individuals to kind of like come at it where it's like, well, if I was the manager, how would I solve that is the thing that I've had conversations with people before, where it's like, they're complaining about something. I'm like, how, if you were managing you, how would you respond to this? And then it was like, oh, okay, I got that now. So it's conversations.
I like to do random check-ins. Like I love to check in versus check on a project. I think that's really important to understand what are the challenges that someone's dealing with, and that sometimes can come up when you just send them like, hey, do you have 10 minutes to catch up? Want to see how you're feeling today? When I'm more intentional around that for like the more dispersed team members to give them the time, but something might be top of mind that they didn't share during their one-on-one. In addition to when we do offsites, we do allow people who travel an extra day to come in to spend that time that they might, additional time that they can meet with their team, really give them that opportunity to continuously build those bonds. Any questions before?
We got one over here with a microphone,
sorry.
and then one over here who will need a microphone.
Ted Fidlock, in transition, but one of the concerns that I have sort of is a hybrid of what you were talking about. Someone who's working remotely won't turn off, will do more work, but the people who do get in person get the promotions. And that's a key area. How do you make sure there's not an inequity on who gets, the development? We know evaluations are generally broken a lot. So how do we be more intentional about getting everyone equal opportunity?
That is a great question. So one of the things that we do as an organization is we have 2 different career conversations each year. One that we just completed, which is the mid-year, where we look to your future, where we ask, what are you looking for in your future? So we know what you're looking for, both from a manager standpoint and an organization, so that we can provide you those resources in which to grow in that way. And usually it is like, I'm an IC3 and I want to be an IC4. This is what's in IC, these are the skill sets I need in IC4. That's what I'm looking to build. So building that, and I also read all of them, so I know what everybody wants to be when they grow up, and so I can help them get those things. And then an annual review where it's like past looking what you've done. So something that we do is we have 2 cycles where we do promotions, is like we have already been having conversations with managers, identifying people on their team. We don't have as many remote folks, but of the folks that are remote, I ask that question. I'm like, how is that person doing? How is their performance? and they get promoted just as much as the other people within the organization. We try to be consistent, and that is not the only thing that would impact you getting promoted is if you are fully remote. Unfortunately, you won't be able to be a manager, and that is in our policy. Like, we have that all written down in a policy of, like, if you do go fully remote, that's an opportunity that might not be available to you.
Yeah, I think it's a big responsibility, duty of managers to be equitable with when they have a mix of both. Definitely taking the time to do things like individual development plans with their remote workers. I think honestly, at this current time, there's almost more of a risk of overcompensating for that, and just when you know that someone's physically in the office, just kind of assume what they're doing and not maybe take that time to focus on their development and take that time to be meeting with them, where when you know you have to be intentional about it with your remote workers, you dedicate that time, and sometimes you kind of look away on the onsite and kind of just mail it in with them a little bit. So I think it's a good point you raise, and it is a real challenge for managers for both sides of the coin, I'd say.
And I would say one big thing is we've moved to a more continuous performance model where performance is top of mind for our employees. So we do quarterly reviews where everything is no longer an annual cycle, but also I think it's recognizing your bias. Every time that I do a review, I love this. I throw it through ChatGPT and say, where is my bias within this? Recognizing and pulling it out, and they say, well, here's a statement that is not objective or something like that. And then we've actually now implemented like guidelines for managers to utilize AI appropriately to understand where might they have a bias as well. How do we create an equitable review process that's helping people grow, learn, and develop, and then complementing that with calibrations. Working cross-functionally to understand, is this person really being promoted? Why are they being promoted? Is there a bias associated with it? So we're tackling it from a multi-pronged approach.
I love calibrations. So we definitely have a calibration model as well, where managers have to like advocate for why they're recommending someone for promotion. They have to define the business need for the person to move to that level, as well as talk about their demonstrated performance. But also something that we do within our calibrations is there's always a time where it's like, is there anybody that we haven't talked about today? So the people that participate are all of our managers and all of our senior leaders. And so we ask, is there anybody that we haven't talked about today? And this is like another manager within the organization will be like, hey, I've been recognizing that this person has been going above and beyond. Their name is not on this list. And usually what they don't know is that because that person got a comp increase and they're going to get promoted in 6 months. But that is an opportunity for other people to be asking questions. And questions do come up in those calibrations where it's like, but is that really a business need? Is this just a manager who is much better at advocating? And that's again where people ops comes into play, where like I've had conversations where it's like, well, have you considered this person? And like, okay. And I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Keith. In this debate between remote versus on-site, one of the arguments that is made for being on-site is collaboration. So my question is, what do you see as the downsides of, video calls, instant messaging, wikis, sharing information, project metrics, being online, that kind of thing? It seems to me the tools are getting very good. So what do you see as the downsides of those tools? In other words, doing it virtually. I worked remotely once for a company, and we would have 4 or 5 hours a day of meetings, which is collaboration, right? And with instant messaging, if you have a question, you don't have to go out of your office, walk down the hall, find the person, and ask the question. You just jot it into the message, and you'll get something quickly back. So what's the downside of the virtual, with the appropriate tools? What's the downside? You can still have collaboration.
I think they're great tools. I use them every day. I think they're really good, but I think the short answer is this right here. Where I'm here and I'm present, I'm not on my phone. I'm paying attention to the audience, paying attention to the questions, my fellow panelists. If I'm at home on my desk, I'll be the first to admit it. There's a chance I might be tempted to respond to an email in the middle of a Zoom meeting or check something on my phone or whatever it may be. And so I think, for better or worse, being present in person is you're going to see that body language, those nonverbal cues, all that kind of stuff.
There's video calls.
Right, yeah, but I can be on my Zoom and also
mean,
be
you're
doing
getting-
this,
you're
and
getting a call
I'm getting
right
a call right now, yeah, so. Your old mom's giving me a buzz right now, so.
I would say for me, it's just one is if an organization doesn't have like the ways of working written out. So, for example, why do we utilize a video call? Why do we need this meeting? Like thinking about the utilization of your time appropriately. I think then you get into redundancy of working like 5 hours where 2 meetings actually overlap that we consolidate appropriately. So I think it's thinking about like your work schedule around like, do we actually need this meeting? Why is this meeting? And how do you asynchronously like communicate to the organization what communication styles look like? So I think that's one is just like the overusage of meetings. And then for me, I think it's just there is that like swiveling around and saying hi to Susie like that you do miss, and being online all the time. Like you just said, I had to put my phone down because I'm like, okay, I have a LinkedIn, I have this and this, and it's always being alert. And I think it's being intentional with when you are like offline, turn off your Slack, like literally like mute it. Do not look at it because people will still respond. When you go on vacation, like don't look at it. Like actually step away and do that.
I delete the app when I'm on vacation. Sometimes. I can't say I have good work-life balance. I've definitely done onboarding from a beach in Mexico.
So like I said, so I think it's the intentionality behind like how does your office work? Do you communicate and write down everything appropriately so you're not having overused meetings, but also like how do you step away when you need to? Like I like a good work-life balance. Like I like to spend time with my husband. I like to like go for a walk. Like, and if I have my Slack on me, I'm always gonna check it. Like I always think that I hate to say this that there's a firestorm when someone's Slacking. I'm like, okay, who's being fired or who's doing what? Like, and I'm like, okay, even though it could be something like, hey, how's your day going?
Is there a potential missing of the water cooler thing, the serendipity, you bump into somebody in the office? Is that missing?
Like that can definitely happen, but like also some people don't like that.
Yeah.
So it's like that, like so we try to have like these asynchronous activities. Sometimes we have a trivia night happening after work today, so we create opportunities for those activities to happen. I have freshly baked cookies every Monday at 4, and it's like my way to make Mondays less blah, and we call them cookie convos, where it's like that's like creating that water cooler moment in the middle of your day.
I think whether they're virtual or in person, if people are dreading the meetings that much, then it's probably something we should take a look at and see what are we doing wrong? Why are our meetings stale? What can we do to make them more engaging? Again, whether that's in person or virtually.
I know to your thing about like that water cooler and running into somebody, recognizing now that like an event is not going to please everybody, and how do you find the most impact within it? Like if you are going to move like 5 out of 10 people, do you find value in that versus like one person? So it's the intentionality behind how you're setting up these interactions with one another.
Yeah.
I have a question around like the next generation of workers entering the workforce. What are their values? How are you supporting them?
Gosh.
All right, so it looks like we're at time. It's hard to know. I know that like the ways of working have changed. I've been working for 30 years. I've like one of my first jobs was on Wall Street. I've worked in retail. I've worked in insurance. I've worked everywhere. And the way that I work now versus how I worked then has evolved over time, as well as being in my role is like meeting people where they are and understanding the different backgrounds of folks. And so making sure like that you're building an environment in which all people from all walks of life are welcome. And that includes the rising generation and learning from them. And there are great things that they suggest, and we have to pivot with them because they're the future.
Yeah, I think it's a focus on us learning and them learning generational differences. They're very adept at a virtual work environment and taking advantage of some of that technologies. I think where they tend to need the most help or could use the most training and guidance is communication. So they're not used to picking up the phone and having a conversation necessarily, or writing out a full-fledged email versus a text message or something like that. So I think there's a lot of focus on communication goes a long way with the younger generation.
And I think it's just an expectation of what working is. We've seen that people coming in they want to have that second job. They have a side gig on Etsy. They want to do X, Y, and Z. And it's recognizing and taking that step back of like, is there a problem with them actually doing that? Like, if they're doing this on the side business and it's not impacting the business, it's not a competitor, why am I to be there so long as that they're doing their work? So it's like, how has work evolved in terms of like just, I would say, working, expectations, and how do we modify our approach or be more open to it? I think that openness goes a long way, especially across different generations, to ensure that we're meeting all of our employees, whether it's millennials, Gen X, boomers. Like, I forget how many generations we have within the workforce now.
We're at Z now.
We're at Z now, like, so. So, yes. This, I want to do like closing.
Really great questions. I love it.
I know.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra Ma. I'm co-founder and CEO of Jovial. We're all about creating the conditions for teams to thrive and connect, right? So I love this conversation. I think a lot has come up around collaboration, obviously. And I think the one thing to point out here is that it's not just about collaboration, right? Not all collaboration's equal. It's about effective collaboration. And I think the three of you, honestly are very intentional. That came up a lot: intentionality, communication, transparency, which is amazing. But I think some of the trends we see now with most companies is that there is this mandate. I think, Barbara, you mentioned this return to office mandate. And, everybody has to go in 3 times a week. And the narrative is, Paul, to your point, collaboration. But what actually happens in reality is that people are going in and they're taking video calls because the teams they actually work with are globally distributed. And so, I think there's like a systemic change needed, but I wanted to get, the three of you, your perspectives on what has to happen to change this opinion or perspective of the conflation of collaboration equals in-person work to make a greater change overall.
I've been being nice about this panel on like my opinions on that because I fully
Give us the real talk right now.
because I go. No, I fully agree. I think that there is this perception that in office means that you're more productive. It means that you can work harder, work smarter, and I don't agree with that. We've seen that throughout COVID, but I think that there are, and this is a bias of me, older generations that were in office. And I think as times change and we show that companies can be successful, you see revenue grow, you see headcount grow, you find ways that we're thinking about what work means for one another, it will naturally change as we, I would say, grow and progress with the newer generations. But I do think it will still take time because you still see with PwC now that's going to be tracking employees who are going in the office to make sure they're in 3 days so they're not doing, what is it, the coffee badge where you just tap to go coffee and then you leave. So like you're seeing this regression, but I think that pushback around why are we doing this regression and continuously being respectful around pushing back and asking those thoughtful questions is how we will continuously see change within it.
Yeah, I think as leaders, we just have to avoid being lazy and doing something for the sake of it and saying, the study shows this, so this is what's best for us, and really putting some thought in, okay, we're going to go to the trouble of having people come here, let's make it worth their while and make it invigorating, engaging, make them feel like they came here for a good reason. So really putting some thought into that and not just doing it for the sake of doing it, I think is one of the big things that we're dealing with right now.
Totally agree with you and what you said as well. But I think at least for my organization, we're not having that problem of people coming into the office and then being on video meetings. It's the majority of the time it is people collaborating in a conference room together or a collaboration space, and there might be one person who is remote in that meeting. So it is not like sitting at your desk talking to a colleague who's not in the office. So that's us, and that's one of the reasons why we have the model that we have and have had it for the number of years that we've had it.
So we're at 5 minutes left. I would love just for you, if you both want to wrap up and kind of give key learnings or what advice would you give the audience based upon your working style?
One thing I would say is that no model is the right model. Is what it is. It's this is the model that my company is using, and I've had conversations with people where they're like, you have to defend this because this is the organization. I'm like, I actually like this model, and I feel like I can defend this model because I like it, and a lot of people in the organization like it. But there are other organizations that might offer fully remote, and that might be what you want, like what that company's needs are, and what the employees of that company need, and inversely in person. So all of this is right.
I think I just say put it out there in terms of, what you're thinking, why you're thinking it, what you hope to gain from whatever model you decide. Listen, get feedback, don't be afraid of feedback, and don't be afraid to make changes and pivot as things arise. And again, focus on those policies. As you see things that are working or not working, create some policies so you can get consistency across the board, and get things eventually fine-tuned into a way that works for everybody.
I want to thank Barbara as well as Paul for being here and this audience. I think one of the big things that we can agree on is the consensus of being flexible and inclusive approaches to balancing the, I would say, the strengths of whether it's remote, hybrid, or on-site working. I encourage companies to be open to change, thinking about how you continuously learn, as well as how you adapt to evolving work environments. One of the biggest things is that lean on each other. We are a group of people professionals, and we've seen our role expand over the past 3 years in ways that I would say are unimaginable, that you wouldn't have thought what would be under your purview. Because as a community, aspects of navigating this will be done together in terms of the future of work. So I want to thank you all for attending today. And if you have any questions, we'll be around after.
Thank you.